also responsible for global mobility. So our invitation to our external provider K2 Mobility through my team to be able to give you some insight as to what's coming with our looming Brexit, which we're all painfully aware of. So I think without further ado, I'll introduce Binu, who will walk you through our content for today. Binu?
Thank you very much, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Hopefully, yes. I'll try not to shout so that it echoes from here. So I'm from K2 Corporate Mobility, and we provide, as well as global mobility services, solutions, immigration advice as well. So we have an immigration practice, and my specialism is UK inbound. So any questions that you have around Brexit, what that means for you, I'm hoping I'll be able to answer all of your questions, but if there is anything, I've got my notepad and pen ready so I can take questions and take them away, discuss them with UK government, with the Home Office, if it's something very, very complex, and then come back to you as well. So please feel free to get in touch. My contact details will be at the end of this presentation. So without further ado, so Brexit and what it means. At the moment, there's obviously a lot of speculation around Brexit, whether there'll be a deal, a no-deal scenario as we get closer to the 29th of March, and that will Brexit will happen at 11 p.m. on the 29th of March.
Sorry, this is going to be very difficult with the slides.
My apologies.
We'll do our best.
Yeah, it's a bit bright in here, but I guess you have the slides, but it's quite a large document, isn't it? I guess. Okay, so what we're going to start with is what the position is right now, and then we'll talk a little bit about the actual EU settlement scheme and what that actually means, how to make the application, whether you're eligible to apply now for either pre-settled status, which is if you haven't been here for the full 5 years, the maximum term that you require to settle in the UK, you would get what's called pre-settled status. And if you have been here for 5 years, either in the past or totaling 5 years, or you will do in the near future, how you will qualify to apply for the settled status as well. So we'll talk about the online application process, the types of documents you need to submit, and the app as well that's available now. So the government's obviously moved forward with the technology that they've got. So far, the applications that we've made, it's quite a simplistic process. So my advice would be, if you do qualify now, obviously you can make the application now. We'll also look at a no-deal scenario and the dates around that, when you need to apply by, what the deadlines are, what that means for you in terms of employment as well. So we'll look at those dates. And then we'll take a look at the future skills-based immigration system, which will go live from the 1st of January 2021. I've also got a little bit of information about UK nationals in the EU, but I don't think any of you here will probably be interested in that, possibly. But obviously, there is some thought process around what UK nationals will do in the EU. And then obviously, feel free to ask questions as we go through, and let's make this as interactive as possible. Just release all of these, I think it'll be easier. Okay. So we know on the 23rd of June 2016, the referendum took place, and 52% of people that voted to leave the EU. And the Prime Minister then, on the 29th of March 2017, triggered Article 50, which basically means that we now have 2 years to negotiate the withdrawal agreement. And that's why we are now standing at almost the 29th of March 2019, and there still seems to be speculation around the withdrawal agreement at the moment, as you've probably all seen in the press. And then in 2017, June, the government published guidance around protecting the rights of EU workers in the UK, and obviously a proposal document on the EU settlement scheme, which actually now has become part of the immigration process. So one thing that we do know, what we discuss here today about inbound UK immigration, for all of you in this room, that the scheme is settled and it's not likely to change. It might be tweaked, but the application process is now live as of the 21st of January. So it's in the final pilot phase, but from the 29th of March, it will go live to everybody that doesn't have biometric passports, basically. So on the 21st of January, when they opened up the scheme in the final pilot phase for you to be able to apply under the EU settlement scheme, if you have a biometric passport which is chipped, or a biometric residence card, or a permanent residence card which has a chip in it, You can therefore now make the application, but if you don't, then you have to wait until after the 29th of March. December last year, the government published the white paper, so at the moment it hasn't become law, but this is the future immigration system for EU nationals. So if you're seeking employment later on down the line coming to the UK, what that will look like, and it will pretty much fall under the UK immigration points-based system, which already exists. There'll only be one route into the UK, and that will be via the skills-based system. And we'll have a little bit of a look around that as well and explore that.
Rubina, just to clarify, that future skills-based system is based on folks that aren't currently here, but would be coming in after that, whatever the deadline is, right?
That's right, that's right. So if you don't make any sort of application now, for example, either in a deal or a no-deal scenario, and you decide to leave the UK, and then you decide to return, and you haven't got any sort of pre-settled or settled status in the UK, then you would need to be eligible and qualify under the future skills-based immigration system. At the moment, all we've got is guidelines. It's a white paper. So as I mentioned, it still needs to go through Parliament and receive the royal assent and the approval. So it could change, but we can talk about very high level what that looks like. And as you might have seen, the removal of the £65 application fee. Has anybody actually looked into the EU settlement scheme here? Hands, show of hands. Excellent. Okay, so you'll know what I'm referring to, otherwise I'll break it down a little bit more. So basically, the application up until January carried a £65 government fee, but that's actually now been removed. In this pilot phase, where people are making applications at the moment, you still have to pay the fee, but it will be refunded after the 29th of March, is what the Prime Minister's promised. So before we begin, who is an EU national? So at the top, you can see all of the European Union countries, and then further down, all the countries under the European Free Trade Association, and they obviously consist of Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland. Now up until very recently, there was no agreement as to how nationals of these countries, the latter countries, would be eligible, but we have been advised now, and there is information that's been published, not around the actual application process, but it will be something that mirrors very similar to the EU settlement scheme process as well. It will be a digital online process. Do we have any nationalities under the European Free Trade Association in the room? No. Okay, perfect. So, this is what the EU settlement scheme looks like in a deal scenario. So, if we leave, there is a withdrawal agreement that has been agreed by the 29th of March. This is what the timetable of events is going to look like. So, at the moment, we still have, obviously, EU nationals who are exercising free movement rights in the UK. But on the 29th of March, the date of Brexit, that free movement will end. Basically, is what this table is telling you. And if you've arrived in the UK by the 31st of December 2020, so you're obviously already here, but if anybody else is arriving, if you leave, you come back. If you've been here for up to 5 years, or you've done a block period of 5 years in the UK already, you can qualify for what's known as settled status in the UK. Now, if you haven't been in the UK for 5 years already, so you've done, let's just say, 2 years in the UK, you will get what's called pre-settled status, and you can make that application now, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a biometric passport. Is everybody still with me? Perfect, okay, all right. So if anybody arrives in the UK, if you have family members, for example, by the 31st of December 2020, they can apply up until the 30th of June 2021 under the EU settlement scheme. And then effective 1st of January 2021, there'll be the future immigration system in place, which basically means that anyone that arrives in the UK from the 1st of January 2021, they'll need to make an application under the points-based system.
And this time we refer to no deal or deal, doesn't matter if it's going.
This isn't a deal scenario. This is a deal scenario. We will look at the no deal scenario as well. So let's take a look at the actual application process for settled status.
So one day the sun's out in England and he doesn't let us see the screen.
Yes, I'm having to see it myself.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Okay, so I'm not going to read that out to you, but I'll leave it up there for a couple of minutes so that you can have a read. But basically, if you obtain settled status in the UK, it's the equivalent of indefinite leave to remain. So you are no longer subject to any immigration restrictions in the UK. The actual settled status, when it's issued, it's going to be a virtual document, so it's just online. You will be given a reference number. You don't get a physical document. So does anybody here at the moment hold a registration card or a residence card or a permanent residence card that they've applied for because they've been here for 5 years already and they made an application to the Home Office and they were granted, basically it looks like a credit card. Does anybody have one of those? Okay. You do have one of those. Perfect. Thank you. Blue paper card, basically. Okay, that's fine. So if you have that, you still need to swap that for settled status. And do you actually hold permanent residence, or is it a residence card? Have you done 5 years in the UK? You have, okay. So you will still need to apply. So I think a lot of people that I've spoken to, EU nationals, EU workers in the UK, they've said at these types of meetings, well, I've got one of those documents, I don't need to apply, do I? But you do, you just need to swap it. That's all you need to do. So you'll still be subject to making an online application. Now, if you have the document already, I'd recommend why not just wait until after the 29th of March and make your application when there is no government fee, because at the moment when you apply, you do have to pay the £65, but the Home Office will refund that to you in due course. So it might be an easier process for you to do it that way. So once you've actually done, you've completed 5 years in the UK, you can apply for this settled status, and the proof of continuous residence that you need to be able to show is that you've actually spent at least 6 months in any 12 months leading up to those 5 years in the UK. So you cannot be absent for more than 6 months in each year to qualify for settled status. And for any special circumstances, for example, maternity leave or sickness or injury, where you had to return back to obviously your country of legal residence, to your home country, you can have a break for at least 12 months, but you'll need to provide evidence to be able to show the reason for your absence of 12 months from the UK.
And I think you talk on another slide about once you get settled status, is there a limitation if you leave the country, how long can you be out of that?
So I was going to go around the circle here. So if you leave the UK and return within 5 years, so you can actually, once you've got settled status, you can leave the UK for up to 5 years and not lose the settled status. So what my advice to you would be obviously make sort of either frequent visits back or don't go over by a day of the full 5 years. So that's the benefit of this. And also, is there anybody in the room that holds indefinite leave to remain if they're married to a British national or they've obtained indefinite leave to remain in another way? No. It might be worthwhile mentioning anyway. For example, if you did qualify under indefinite leave to remain of being married to a UK citizen, you can still apply for this settled status because under the UK immigration rules, you can only be absent from the UK for up to 2 years under the immigration rules, whereas under this EU settled status, if you hold the settled status, you can be out for up to 5 years, and that's quite beneficial to some, obviously, if they want to take a secondment overseas.
That only applies to EU nationals, though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, unfortunately. So yeah. Other foreign nationals are worse off.
I'm no
Yes.
I'm not married, but I have a daughter with an English passport, with an English citizen, so that was something I was going to look into.
Sure. Okay. So I mean, you can. How long have you been in the UK?
6 years.
6 years. Okay. So I mean, you could apply for the settled status rather than going down the indefinite leave to remain route, is what I would recommend. So that's a perfect example that if you apply under this route, you can be absent from the UK for up to 5 years and not lose the settled status, so you can come and go freely. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, just a question that if you've been to the UK, let's say like 7 or 8 years, but you had a year break, then you can still apply for the settled
So you can apply, but I think I mentioned earlier that if you've been out for 12 months, in that period of time, what was the reason behind it? So the Home Office will probably want to take a look at the reasoning behind it. The way that they look at this application, when you submit the application, I will come on to that when we look at applying, but they don't ask you for any absences from the UK in the application process at the moment. Now in time that might change. They'll just look at your national insurance contributions, and if they think that you obviously qualify, they will grant this. So my advice to you would be apply after the 29th of March. There's no government fee, so there's not really anything to lose when you make the application. I mean, you won't lose anything now. If you have a biometric passport, you'll get the £65 back. But it's how they will navigate with the HMRC, look at your tax records, and if they're all up to date, then they will grant you settled status. I think that what the government are trying to achieve is they're not trying to catch people out. So at the moment there's a lot of goodwill in this application, and it may change later on down the line when they start looking at absences. But at the moment I would say if you were to submit an application, they don't ask you for any absences. So you'd be fine to actually apply here. But if it did come to light that you'd been out, you'd have to show evidence of the reasoning behind it. So for example, if you had a maternity leave or you had a sick parent, you need to provide evidence around that for them to then obviously exercise discretion and grant you the settled status.
If I ask early, because maybe we've been planning to discuss that we can hold it, but it's more about citizenship, because maybe some of us want to apply for citizenship.
Yeah, I am going to come to that, but I was going to talk about it here anyway, so that's fine. So you have the blue card at the moment. You switch it to settled status. You need to do 12 months on that settled status, because with this they don't backdate it. So on the day that it's granted, that's your settled status, and then you need to do an additional 12 months on your settled status, and then you can apply for British citizenship.
Or I can apply straight now if I have permanent residence.
If you have permanent residence, yes, you could, but you need to apply for the permanent residence. Obviously, you have the permanent residence card. So
if I would swap for settlement status, then I'll have to wait 12 months.
well, no, you don't. So you've got the permanent residence already. Have you done 12 months on that permanent residence? So you can apply now for citizenship, and you don't need to do this. So I would recommend you applying for citizenship now.
But whoever's got a settlement status has to wait
12
for
months.
naturalization as well.
That's right. Yeah. And if you have a child born in the UK, once you've been granted settled status, then that child will automatically be British. You will look too young to leave that information right now anyway. So as I've mentioned, the current permanent residence that you hold right now, you do need to switch that. If you don't qualify for citizenship like this lady here, you would need to swap that over for the settled status document. Okay, let's look at the pre-settled status. So, you've arrived in the UK, you've only been here for 12 months. What you would need to do is therefore, either now, if you have a biometric passport, or after the 29th of March, is apply for pre-settled status. But you have until the 31st of December 2020 to do so. But my advice to you would be, obviously, in a deal or no deal scenario, which we will look at, but in a deal scenario, if you are eligible, I would urge you to apply as soon as possible, really. Reason being, because the application processing times at the moment are around 24 hours. So I submitted an application yesterday morning for a client. The application took around 30 minutes to complete. It would have taken less than that if the technology had worked, but it was a little bit glitchy yesterday. So I submitted it yesterday morning, and by 8 o'clock in the evening, there was a decision already. So that person was granted settled status, basically. But even on the pre-settled status applications, they're coming through within the same sort of time frame at the moment. What the Home Office has said is that once, obviously there's going to be 3.5 million EU nationals, or just under 4 million EU nationals applying, that when they do pick up the pace and the volume increases, the maximum time they think it will take them is probably about 2 to 3 weeks. So it's still quite a quick decision. What else can I tell you about the pre-settled status? So you have to have lived continuously in the UK. Again, there is the 6 months in any 12-month period absence from the UK that you can have as a given. But once you have the pre-settled status, you can't have an absence of more than 2 years out of the UK, so a block period of 2 years outside the UK. So you know we discussed about settled status. If you are granted settled status, you can be out of the UK for up to 5 years. With the pre-settled, because you still need to be eligible and qualify for the settled status, you can only have up to 2 years in a row outside the UK, and they need to really be for a special reason as well, as I've mentioned earlier, maternity leave or sickness or something along those lines. But otherwise, it's just 6 months in any 12-month rolling period that you can be out. So if you want to go on obviously a holiday or a sabbatical or something like that, 6 months in the 12-month time frame is all that you should really limit yourself to.
And anyone who's currently living in the UK can apply.
I'm sorry.
Anyone who's currently living in the UK can apply for pre-settled,
Oh, yes,
regardless of
yeah.
the time if they've been here 2 months or 6 months.
Absolutely, yes. So you have until 31st of December 2020 to make the application. But again, why wouldn't you apply sooner? Because the sooner that you apply, the sooner the clock starts ticking for you to apply for settled status. So if you left it until December 2020, you're not really going to qualify for settled status until 2025. So again, make the application now. There's nothing, you have nothing to lose really.
Sorry, which, I don't know if you said before, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Is there any particular documents that, you know, when you do the application online, that you need to provide, or how you are going to do that? It's like scanning, you know.
We're going to come to it. We're coming to it. But it's a very good question. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm struggling to see the slides myself. So with the pre-settled status, you have the same access to obviously public benefits, also medical, healthcare, pensions, you can work, and you have access to studies as well if that's what you wanted to do with the pre-settled status. So it's business as usual, as you're doing so now. And again, if you have the residence card already, you do need to switch it for the pre-settled status, and the Home Office will automatically pick up. So if you've done 2 years in the UK already, they will look at your national insurance contributions and your tax records and grant you settled status. So if you know you've already done 2 years in the UK, just obviously do the full 5 years and then apply for the settled status. Okay, so this, there we go, you beat me to it, you see. So applying, so the application itself, it's an online application, it's a digital application, and as I've mentioned, I've used the technology several times now. You can use an Android phone only, so anybody that has an iPhone, unfortunately the iPhone technology is not compatible. So there is an app that you can download. So I have a Motorola phone specifically to make these applications, and the app is called EU Exit Engagement. But all of this guidance is available on the Home Office website, the .gov.uk website. Once you've downloaded the app, I do actually have a phone that has hold it from a distance.
Otherwise, you can do it via the web.
So that's what it looks like basically. It's sort of a blue screen, and it says EU Exit ID document check. But basically what it does is, so check your documents and information. It's really quite high tech actually, because you open the page of your passport with the data page, and you hold it over, and it scans the information, and automatically it reads your passport and the information comes up on the screen. And then you close it, front cover, put your phone on top of it, and it beeps because it's reading the chip in the passport itself. Then you take a digital photograph of yourself, and it also scans your face as well. Against a white background is what I would recommend. Once you've done that, it then generates a reference number, and you have to add in a password. It asks you for your phone number or email address. You can then log on from any laptop, tablet, PC to complete the rest of the application. And this is the key documentation that you would need. So proof of identity is your passport, or you might have an electronic biometric residence card, as I've mentioned. You don't have that one, so obviously that wouldn't work. But if you have a biometric passport, you can apply now. If you don't have a biometric passport right now, then you would have to apply after the 29th of March.
So it's only passport? It's
Yes.
only document?
That's-
I have an Italian ID card, which is like...
You can use the Italian ID card as well, yeah. So long as if it's an electronic chipped ID card, it's not. Okay, so then you wouldn't be able
Well,
to
I'm going
use
to
that.
get the passport like next month, so...
Great, okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it must be passport.
Yeah, so passport. Proof of your residence in the UK. So you obviously provide your addresses where you've lived over the last 5 years or where you're living at the moment. And also, if you've got family members who are applying as well, who are non-EEA, so if you have a partner, for example, who's a US national, they can also apply under this scheme as well. But again, they need to have a biometric passport to apply now. And there's a declaration for any criminal convictions. So my advice to you would be, if you do have obviously any sort of convictions or any county court judgments, and I'm sure that none of you do, but just a word of advice is to obviously seek some advice around that, because whilst the Home Office won't discriminate with any criminal convictions, now that it's become an application process, they do and they don't exercise discretion. So obviously just look into that, because there is a declaration that you will need to click on and accept, and if there is something that comes out later on down the line, then the application could be refused or rejected, or further information sought from yourselves. So scanning the ID document, that you actually start off with the scanning of your ID document first of all. So you have to start with the passport scanning, and then you continue on to the application, to complete the application. What it also asks you for is about 20 questions, very personal questions that you have to set up, like what was the name of your first pet? What was the name of, what sort of car did you have? And I think that's just an additional added security measure on the actual application form as well. Once you've submitted it, you receive an acknowledgement by email, which will confirm that your application is submitted, and it's called a certificate of application. And then once it's approved, it generates a reference number and confirms that you either have pre-settled status or settled status. So in the meantime, whilst you've submitted your application, in the background, the Home Office are running an application programme interface check with the HMRC, and they're checking your tax records and your national insurance contributions that you've made in the UK. And that's how, so yesterday the application, as an example that I submitted, it's submitted in the morning. There was a decision by 8 o'clock in the evening confirming that that individual had settled status. Now, if you don't have an Android phone, you can actually borrow somebody's phone, but one thing that I've noticed is that you will have to uninstall the app when you make a new application. Every time you make a new application, you have to uninstall it and then install it, because otherwise it continues to tell you that
it works only for one kind of application.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So just uninstall it and install it back onto your phone, and it will work. So these little sort of tips that are quite useful, hopefully, to you. Again, if you don't have an Android phone, you can submit your documents by post, but that would mean you being without your passport during the time that the application is in process. What I have been advised is, if you do submit that way, that the application will probably take much longer, obviously, because it takes time for post to arrive at the Home Office, for somebody to actually be assigned to the application, and so forth as well.
Is there a centre where you can just bring your passport on the day?
Like a checking service, yes. Yes, so it's a very good question. So you can take it to local authorities. It will tell you online. So when you submit the application, it will tell you the nearest local authority that you can go to. Also post office as well. You'd be able to go to a local post office, but only the ones that check the biometrics enrolment. So check before you go to the post office that they do offer that facility.
So you just need to show it to them. They will prove that it's you, and that's it. And you keep your passport with you. Or no?
I'm not too sure about that, actually. I'd have to look into that for you and come back to you, but I haven't come across that at the moment, because the applications that we're making, we're able to use the technology. But I will look into it. It's a very good question. Okay, so if you've got, if you have difficulty making your application, or the Home Office there will often be times where they can't match up national insurance records. There might be a digit that's incorrect in your national insurance number, and the check with the HMRC might come back as a negative. Then the Home Office will email you and ask you for further information. And typically the type of information they will ask for is all listed here. So this is the sort of information that they have already confirmed that you will be able to submit. Likewise, if you've already been here 10 years, for example, and you've only recently started working, but you've done a block period of 5 years in the past, again, you will be able to prove with your national insurance number that you have been working here, but also if you had any of this evidence from 5 years ago, you'll also be able to submit this information as well. But clearly, when you do submit this information, it goes by hard copy post to the Home Office, and therefore that might delay the application processing times for you as well. But if they do come back to you and say you can actually scan in the information, because nowadays a lot of the documents that we're scanning in for normal visa applications, it's all being scanned in, and their verification process is they're using business intelligence basically, so they don't even ask for the original documents under the immigration rules. But time will tell whether they ask for the originals or not at the moment. Right, does anybody have any questions around the application process for the pre-settled or settled scheme before I move on to the no-deal scenario? Is everybody quite clear on how to make the application? Happy to answer any questions.
Question, like I'm in UK for 10 years, so I'm still going to be coming for that settled status, yeah?
You do, yes, yeah. So
And then I need to wait 1 year until I can apply for citizenship anyway.
So if you've been here 10 years already, what you could do, because it's still before the 29th of March, if you wanted to, you could apply for a permanent residence card instead. Now that application is something like 83 pages or something, so it's quite a long document.
Yeah, I was trying to do it, but just get bored with it.
Yeah, but there's only a certain element of that, so there's a certain category, because if it's through employment, it's only part of the application that you need to complete, so don't let that put you off. But if you apply for permanent residence rather than waiting to apply for this, you will get your permanent residence backdated. They will backdate it for you. So apply via the permanent residence route now, the 83-page document. So get that submitted. You do have to submit your passport, so you will be without that. But I've submitted a few of those in the last couple of months, and they've come through in about 8 weeks.
Yeah, my friend submitted, he was waiting 3 months until passport come back.
They're a bit quicker now, but you can request for your passport back once it's been in for after 7 days. You can request for it back, and there's a passport return service. But if you applied under permanent residence, they will. You have to specifically ask them in a cover letter, to backdate your permanent residence. So, for example, if you've been here, as you said, 10 years, they'll backdate it to 5 years ago, and that way you can apply for British citizenship straight away.
Yeah, because I was waiting at all this deal with Brexit finish to realize how to go for citizenship.
Yeah, so you can do that. So you don't have to wait and apply for the settled status, because they will only grant it to you from today, and then you'll have to do 12 months.
So with settlement status, you also, after application, you have to send them documents also, like passport writing, or you don't?
No, that's it. That's it. So when you next travel, for example, once you've got the settled status or even pre-settled status, all you get is a reference number. So it's an email that you'll receive, and that's it. And I would recommend that you file it away safely. But every time that you come through, let's just say Heathrow, through border control, you present your passport, they can automatically check when they scan your passport that you have your pre-settled or settled status. So you don't need to carry anything with you. They will know. And even if there is some sort of error, with the machine on the day or what have you, you can obviously confirm your details. It might take them a few minutes to check, but once you've got the reference number associated with your name, they can always check back at the Home Office and confirm that you have the pre-settled or settled status.
I mean, we talked about this before, but as an employer, do we have an understanding of what our obligation will be to verify that right to work?
Yes, so there is there has been guidance published around that, and because it's an online reference number, there is an online checking service that the employer can run as well. Now, that's obviously, if you've got quite a few EU employees, that will take time. But there are obviously providers out there that will do the right to work checks for you and do all of the reporting. So, for example, if you had obviously all of these individuals in this room that are applying, you'll need to do that.
So it's still our obligation as an employer, I expect, to ensure that they have the right to work documents, right? So it's our process.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this.
Yeah. Okay.
What if you, for example, are traveling, let's say in April, but you haven't done the application? Would I expect any problems at the airport, or?
No, so there is a transitionary period, so up until the 31st of December 2020 in a deal scenario. Yeah, you can. Just don't be out for more than 5 years if you leave.
Okay, yeah.
As a reminder. Okay, so that settled scheme, the EU settled scheme or pre-settled scheme, that is remaining, so that is not going to change. It might get tweaked here and there, I think, as time goes on, but that's here to stay. So that's the only application that you need to make going forward. Now, in a no-deal scenario, obviously this doesn't really apply to any of you, but for sake of obviously going through it, if you need to have arrived in the UK by the 29th of March. So if you think about it, that's obviously not that far off. And if you arrive by the 29th of March 2019, you will have until the 31st of December 2020 to make an application for pre-settled or settled status, but you must have arrived by the 29th of March. Anybody that arrives from the 30th of March through to the 31st of December 2020, there's going to be, obviously you can see transitional arrangements for business continuity, which basically means that EU nationals from the 30th of March in a no-deal scenario will be able to come to the UK freely, but if they're coming here to work, they can come in, they can start working straight away within a 3-month time frame that they'll be given. So if they're only coming here for a tourism, for a holiday, or for a job interview, they can stay for up to 3 months. So it's restricted to 3 months, whereas usual visitors can come in for up to 6 months. But if they can start working straight away or studying straight away if they want to from the 30th of March until 31st of December 2020, but they need to apply for a work permit. And the work permission that is granted during this transition period from the 30th of March will be valid for 3 years. So you're restricted to 3 years coming to the UK. This is in a no-deal scenario, just as a reminder. So obviously it's already tightening up in this sort of situation. And then from the 1st of January 2021, EU employees or EU workers looking to work or study in the UK will need to apply for either a student visa to come to the UK or a work permit under the future skills-based system. So like other foreign nationals apply for skilled work permits, there's a salary threshold, you need to have qualifications, they need to be at a certain regulated qualification framework level, which basically means of a certain standard, either managerial or if it's obviously at a lower position than that, then you need to be qualified to about A-level standard, basically, which is RQF 3 to 5, but I won't get too technical and go into that right now. Close family members as well, if the relationship was ongoing before the 29th of March, there is a period from the 1st of April to the 29th of March 2022 where close family members can arrive in the UK as well, and that would be mother, father, brother, sister, where they are financially dependent on you, so you are responsible for them. They would be able to come to the UK up until that time. And also, if you're in a relationship with another EU national, but they've been living overseas, so long as that relationship existed before the 29th of March, the cut-off point is the 31st of December 2020. So they need to arrive by that date into the UK. And then if you get married in the future, and you're marrying an EU national from the 1st of January 2021, they would qualify under what the current immigration rules are, and there is an associated financial requirement with that as well. So you need to have an income over the last 6 months of at least 18,600 gross income. So that's before tax, 18,600. Is everybody still with me, or am I confusing everybody? Yeah, perfect.
And after 29th of March 2022, any relatives come just to visit you, they just can come and visit you and go. Yeah? So there won't be any restrictions.
So it's the same as for any other foreign national at the moment. So let's just say, my background is I'm Indian. So if I have any relatives that want to come and visit, or if I have elderly dependents living in India, they just wouldn't be able to come to the UK. There just wouldn't be any route for them, because even elderly dependents, the Home Office really scrutinise those applications. It's basically non-existent now. So again, strongly advise in a no-deal scenario that if you do have obviously dependents on you, individuals or family members, close family members that are dependent on you financially, that they obviously come to the UK within the time limits or the time frames that are specified here. So this is the new immigration framework. again, this is still subject to change. This is a proposal. There is a white paper that was published back in December 2018, as I've mentioned, and I'm not going to go into this at too high level because I think it's still quite premature and it's subject to change. But basically, it gives you the information here as to what EU nationals will be able to do coming to the UK. So short-term visits, there won't be any routine checks at obviously border control. You'll still be able to use the EEA channel coming through to the UK, and there'll be e-gates as well that you can still continue to use. They are planning on introducing something very similar to the ESTA, so it'll be an electronic authorisation, a visa that's issued online, but you do need to apply before travel, but we're probably looking at that being implemented around the 1st of January 2021. But what the UK would like to do is try and keep it as reciprocal as possible with other EU countries as well, because at the moment, a lot of EU countries have already started to put into place contingency plans for in a no-deal scenario for UK nationals going into EU countries. So really, the UK wants to obviously keep it as reciprocal and amicable as possible because it's in everybody's best interests. What they're also planning on introducing temporarily is a 12-month visa. So basically, let's just say we are now at the 1st of January 2021. I think it's on this page. What the government wants to do, so it's actually the lower one that I want to talk about first of all. So if you leave the UK now and then you come back on the 1st of January 2021, the Home Office is planning on introducing this 12-month visa where you can come to the UK, you can work in the UK, you need to apply for the visa to come here. We don't know what the cost is going to look like, but then you can only have strictly 12 months in the UK to work. And this is for, I guess, more junior staff, and I don't know whether that would apply to you, but you come to the UK for 12 months and then you have to have a break from the UK for up to 12 months. So that's called a cooling off period. And I think the fees associated with this 12-month visa are probably likely to escalate over a period of time, which will, obviously it's a government fee. That will need to be made.
Employer-sponsored visa, or is it something that
so this
you'll
is for,
apply to as an individual?
Well, we don't know at the moment, we don't know, but I think it probably will be employer-sponsored because they still need to be able to track
To prove that they're
workers coming into the UK, that's right, so I think it will be. Otherwise, all other EU nationals will need to apply under the current, well, it's very similar to the current immigration system that's in place, where there's a salary requirement, qualifications requirements. You need to have an employer, a sponsor, that is prepared to employ you, so there won't be that free movement any longer. What they are also planning on doing, at the moment there's a quota on how many foreign nationals can come to the UK and be sponsored by an employer. So Value Retail obviously sponsors migrant workers coming to the UK, but there's a quota on that, and the quota is 20,700 work permits that can be issued basically on an annual basis. But if they remove that cap, then what they're trying to do is get traction on obviously EU workers coming to the UK. They are planning on introducing, again speculative, but they are planning on introducing a more light touch system for EEA nationals, where if you're highly skilled, there won't be a resident labour market test coming to the UK, or they might just remove the resident labour market test, the advertising altogether as well. So this might apply not to you necessarily because you're already here, but to any colleagues that you have or family members that are thinking about coming to the UK. This is what it will look like, the framework will look like from the 1st of January 2021. Any questions? So, other ways that Brexit might be delayed or might not happen. There could be potentially another EU referendum, but they're trying to avoid that, and I think by now I think that's highly unlikely, but you never know. Or the other position is that Brexit is delayed, and there has been talk around this that they would like to, well, potentially the offer is there from Brussels to delay Brexit and for it to be pushed back until after the European elections, which basically means that the date would be pushed back to around May or June time this year. And then I put together some countries here, which probably won't really interest you, but it's there in any case. This is for UK nationals in the EU, and it just gives you an indication of a few of the countries that have implemented plans and policies for UK nationals continuing to live and work in these specific countries. And you can see that every EU country here, they've got their own immigration requirements, immigration rules, so the processes will be different. So if you do have any UK worker colleagues that are over in the EU and you're talking to them about this presentation that you've seen, obviously there is some information on here that might be of use to them, but I guess that's probably of more benefit to Value Retail really. Now, I am here with one of my colleagues later on today, Simon Hickson, so he will be on site as well. But if you do have any questions, concerns or queries, obviously you can reach out to any one of us at K2 Corporate Mobility, and we'd be happy to take questions from you. And if you have specific complex issues, obviously we're happy to talk about that, take that away, and then get back to you in due course. Any questions?
Great. I think it would be useful to advertise for the afternoon session. They could go back to their brands and reinforce that, or do you want to?
That would be great. If you can go back to the colleagues and obviously let them know that we do have a 4 o'clock session today, and anybody's welcome to join us back in the village, so it's a great opportunity to come. We'll also, it's okay for us to share this presentation?
There is, we just have to figure out how to do it because it's very, very large, so I don't think we want to email it out. It's like 25 megabytes, but we do have an FAQ document as well, which Bino has pulled together. It's just a few pages that kind of address a number of the key questions that she may have covered today, and we'll figure out through Dominic how we can get that out to the brands. So if you're looking for it, I know we don't have all of your direct emails, but somehow maybe your management can get it out to you, if not directly. Yeah, great. So thank you all very much for coming today. Really appreciate your time. And if you've got any other questions, we're going to be hanging around here as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Thank you.